Yeah. Everybody uses their tripod to dry linens, right?
So this is Hodgepodge night. We're going to do a little bit of a wrap up. I don't think it should take all that long because there's only 5 books. We're going to do a little bit of an update on what I'm reading and how that's going. And I'll have to tell you my fun eBay story because this is getting a bit ridiculous. Just saying. So we're going to start with, though, my shock. So I'm part of the Once Upon a Courtship anthology with, there's 12 of us, and they're all historical romance. Mine's definitely romance. It's epistolary. So if you need a last minute short something, it's only like 38,000 words or something like that. It's pretty short. But it is almost completely epistolary. There are small sections of interactions and stuff with locals and then, at some point, but most of it is epistolary. So there's that. So I had ordered a while back, and I got to talk to her because I thought I ordered 1 copy. I figured I should have a copy of this thing. And because they did paperback and they did the, special edges and all the fun stuffness. And I was like, I should buy 1. But I got 2. So I got to figure out if I didn't pay for everything or if there was something wrong and she sent me something, one of the ones that there was something. I got to find out what's going on because I have 2. But guys, this behemoth arrived today. Well, I mean, if you think about it, 12 novellas in 1 book. I mean, for comparison, this is your normal 400-page book. And this is this behemoth. Oh my gravy. It is so huge. I don't know how you could read it. I mean, it's just so big. It is nice and floppy. I gotta admit, I don't think it could be anything else. But yeah, so I have this, I don't know what I'm going to do with them. I just figured I should buy 1, make sure, that everything was okay with them. And it's fine. But yeah, it has the edges. Frankly, it's a bit fussy for me, but that's okay because a lot of people like fussy a whole lot more than I do. And that's fine. That's just totally fine. But there's Trisha Goyer and Regina Scott. Who else is in here? My brain is just fizzling. Kit Morgan, Mary Lou Tyndall, Camille Elliott, who is Cammie Tang. Helps if you get your, don't spoonerize. Yeah. Lisa Prysock, Marilyn Turk. So, I mean, there's a lot of Louise M. Googe. There's a lot of authors, obviously 12. And yeah. So, but if you're looking for epistolary, the Courting Miss Darling is in there. Anywho, so there's that. Now I gotta go get this thing. Hang on. Okay, so I think it's called Letters from Green Gables. It was letters that Lucy Maud Montgomery wrote to somebody in like 1906 through 1915 or something like that. And when, Epistolary January comes, I was like, oh, I want that because yes, it'll fit with the whole Anne thing. And so I ordered it. And that order arrived. There ain't nothing green, and this is the only gable I got. The Analects, I don't even know what an Analect is. I didn't know how ignorant I was until this arrived, of Confucius. Okay, these things happen. They happen, okay? I understand that. So, I sent them a nice little email. Said I thought I got someone else's book and they probably got mine. How can we arrange a swap? I'd like to get my book. I'd like to get them their book back. Life is grand. Very pleasant. These things happen. And I get an email back that says, what's the order number? What's the listing number? all the things. I'm like, okay, so I copied and I pasted it in there. Perfectly reasonable response. Then they asked me for the title of the book I received, which I already gave them, and the ISBN number. Now look, I know I'm being a bit ridiculous about this, but those ISBN numbers are 13 digits long, and they're tiny. I mean, tiny. And so I'm sitting here going, you've made this error. I've informed you of this error. I've already told you the title, and you expect me to now go find this information for you when you've got the title, so you know you had it, so you can look at your own listing with this title to get that ISBN if it's so very important. So I sent it. I said, I hope I got the digits right, but I sent it. They said, we will send you a label, and when we receive the book back in good condition, we will issue a refund. I don't want this book. So this is not about me going, hey, you sent me the wrong book. I should get to keep it. I don't want this book. I wouldn't expect that anyway. That's not how I roll. But there's like this attitude behind it all that's really bothering me. And at this point, I kind of get the feeling I'm dealing with a bot. But you don't expect a bot on eBay. And I order from big companies. Don't get me wrong. But seriously, this attitude of, once we know you're not trying to cheat us, we'll refund you for our mistake. That's what's getting to me. But not nearly as much as completely ignoring the fact that I ordered a specific book. I asked about how I was going to get that book, and they've ignored that completely. And focused on, well, we want our book back, and then we'll deign to refund you for our mistake. There's just something about it that just didn't sit well. So I send them back another thing. That's fine. Totally happy. Don't want this book. This is grand. But can you please answer my question about when I am to receive the book I ordered? Because that's what I want. You're ignoring this. And knowing that this is not going to happen because it's my opinion that these people don't have it at this point, or they would have, dealt with this, or the bot doesn't know what it's talking about. One of the things, I went and I just ordered another one. And at this point, when they tell me what they're going to do to get me my book, I'm going to say, never mind, I've given someone else my business because I'm done. I don't usually get this impatient, but I ordered this in plenty of time to have this for this challenge. And now if I'm lucky, I'll get it by the 28th. Yes, I can read a book in 3 days. Absolutely. But that's not how I wanted to read this book. So I'm kind of annoyed because I was prepared and they killed my preparation. So annoying. So annoying. Okay. So there was that. Speaking of mishaps, I got to share something else. Why not? I'll be right back. Okay. So my journals. Yeah. Still writing in it. Still loving it. This thing has been just a delight, and reading C.S. Lewis's letters, which I'll get to in a bit, has also changed how I write in it. It's kind of fascinating. So I decided I definitely want to do February. So I went off to the printing place and I got the papers I needed for the next one all printed. And so I have the papers I need for the front and back. This one printed kind of weird. I'm not quite sure why, but whatever. Doesn't matter. It's got exactly what I need, so we're good. And right. And then I think the rest of this is, oh no, and then a plain one. Okay. So I got those because I need those papers for the front, the back, and the pocket and the inside, right? But then I also needed pages for my signatures, and I got them, and I brought them home and I cut them out, and I'm very, very, very pleased with them. They're so pretty. I like how she had us do stiff papers. Really like that. I thought it was a bit overkill at first, and then I changed my mind. I was wrong. She was right. Shocker of all shockers. So I'm just going to kind of flip this and see if you can see what's wrong. You see this? Do you see the problem? Yeah. So, I especially love the upside down quill. That's special. So apparently when they ran the papers through the thing and then they turned them over and ran them through, they weren't careful to make sure that they didn't end up flipped and upside down. So I could go back. They would absolutely reprint them for me. They're amazing down there. They would feel so bad if they knew that this had happened. But I'm not going to tell them. I have decided that I'm going to be content with this, and that's going to be hard. So I'm going to have to do some decor-like things to like cover up, where it's like, okay, that bow is definitely upside down, but it won't bother me. That upside down quill is going to bother me. It's going to be like, no. So, some things won't be so bad. Others will definitely not sit well. Like these upside down words, that's going to be rough. But I carefully chose each page which one was worse. And I decided that this whole page upside down would be worse than this page upside down. But I really just wanted to make sure that I was content with it, and now I'm going to have to, do some decor kind of things so that it's not quite, so like, because if I kind of hide that, I'll be okay. And if I'm writing over this, you won't be able to tell that those words are upside down, that kind of thing, But yeah, that was kind of a little disappointing, but I think it's fixable. And I think it being what it is, fixing it is a creative endeavor. And I think I like that. So, it'll be all right. Obviously, next time when I go in, there wasn't a problem with the first one. So I didn't think anything about it. But next time when I go in for March, I'm pretty sure I'll be like, and we need to be careful. And I mean, I have to, I don't know how I'm going to do it without it being obvious that they were upside down. But if I can avoid saying it. Okay, so I did that. And then let's go to, I'm going to put that up there. Let's move on to the books I've read. So the first book I finished in January was Grantchester Mysteries. It was Sidney, Chambers, and the Shadow of Death. It's weird to say like that has a title like that because inside it you have a series. They're like episodes within the book. So it's like a bunch of short stories that are threaded somehow. I think that's the best way of putting it. And I had seen some of the Grantchester TV show, and I didn't like where it was going, and so I quit watching it. And I was a little concerned about this, but a friend of mine had told me that the books were way better than the show, and it didn't have the same agenda, if you will. And so I was like, okay. And I know that my daughter Shanice loved it. She gave these 5 stars. I gave them 4. And I don't know if I was just in doing that because I really loved the whole thing. But I do have kind of a check. I'm concerned about where it could go. And yet I'm not. So this is probably what I'll talk about the most compared to the rest of the books tonight. So let's get into this. So the like I said, these are episodic. They start off, he is a vicar. Sidney is a vicar in the, is it a city or a town or a village? In Grantchester, whatever it is, he is the vicar. And he, he lives in his little rectory with his housekeeper, who is kind of a lot like those kind of bossy housekeepers, And he's just a lot of fun. He's such a gentle soul. He reminds me a lot of Father Brown. He holds fast to what he believes and to what the church teaches and to what the Bible says. He's very focused on keeping true to the faith, but he's also just kind and gentle, and there's no bashing over the head with it, or there's no supercilious attitude, holier than thou nonsense. He's just a very humble, sweet, approachable man. I really like his character. But then you go through each of these things, and you slowly start getting introduced to new characters. You get introduced to I can't remember his name, the detective in it, the inspector. What is his name? We've been watching Poirot, and I can't get Jap out of my mind. But he's a really neat guy in and of himself, in a totally different way, because he is absolutely, as far as philosophically and faith-wise, like, he is Sidney's opposite. He's cynical and just jaded, if you will, and very much unlike Sidney. So you still get to introduce these people, and all of a sudden all the names are just disappearing. But Sidney's sister introduces him to different people, and he meets one woman who he's clearly interested in. She's clearly interested in him, but she's a bit high society, and he's definitely, being a vicar's wife is not in her wheelhouse. And so, her father's constantly trying to marry her off, and she's constantly not satisfied with who he's coming up with, and there's all that going on. But then we get to the last story in the book. It's I don't want to call it a collection, because it's not that. It's too threaded. But it reads more like vignettes and episodes than, I don't know. It's just very different. But you get to the last one, and in the last one there is a murder. And the person who is murdered, the rumors begin. And the rumors are centered on, you have a man, and this is where it gets going, guys. So this man is a lord of some sort, and he had a really close friend who was also a man, who no longer is a part of the, they had a business-ish relationship that has been separated. And now this lord is a friend of this other man who is really into the art world. He is a good friend of Sidney's female friend, whose name it's gone. So frustrating. Anyway, and I don't think I'm giving away any spoilers here. I really don't. But the question comes up, and the accusation is made that this man, who is this art guy, and this lord had a sexual relationship, that this was homosexual, and everybody is appalled and offended, and the arguments shown made me just assume that was so. Until there's this point where Sidney is talking. Now, Sidney has what I consider an uncomfortable view of it because he doesn't really want to get involved in that side of things. And I can't tell if it's because these aren't members of his church, so this isn't his place. If he doesn't like being involved in people's private lives, that much is very obvious. But is that really what's behind it? What about the faith? It's kind of left up in the air. But here's the deal. He talks to this man, and this man makes this comment. He said, intimate relationships don't have to be sexual. It can even be affectionate without being sexual. And it got me thinking. And I had this whole new theory going on in my head because this is what Shatona does. This guy is right. And his argument is that we were close. We were very close friends, but that doesn't mean it was sexual. And he's very clear in his refutation of the assertion that this was the thing, right? But it got me thinking. And, you look at the Victorian and the Edwardian periods in particular, and probably even before, men who appreciated beauty outside of female beauty, men who appreciated poetry and art and fashion and wore lace, for heaven's sakes, it was never an affront to their masculinity. This was common. But post-World War I and II, in particular, it became a thing. And I wonder if those wars didn't, so many men had shell shock / PTSD and were ridiculed for it and were, by their military and home people, men who were afraid to fight. And there's nothing abnormal about being afraid to fight and kill and die. But they were treated as if they were, and they were treated as if this is such a horrible, terrible thing to whatever. That I think it kind of morphed, and this thing post World War II, but I believe it started with World War I. But post World War II, this attitude that men who appreciate beautiful things must be effeminate, therefore homosexual. All of those things, if one is true, then two is true, and because those are true, three must be true. The whole society at the time created this thing. And I remember in the early 2000s a TV show where this male designer said that he had always loved beautiful fabrics, beautiful fashion. He loved lace and pink and all the things. He just loved it from a very young age. And he was told from a very young age that he must be gay because he liked these things. And then he said something that it broke my heart. As a matter of fact, I put a character like him in one of my books because this just broke my heart. He said, then you're caught up in a lifestyle that you don't realize you don't want until you do. And then you're stuck. Because if you leave that lifestyle, you were rejected by everyone you knew because you have denied who you really are. And so, the homosexual / gays, they would reject him because he's denying who he really is, even though he never was. That's not the point. Apparently he has to be, because at some point, right? And yet straight people also don't trust him because, well, you were and you weren't, I think that this all started heavily post World War II, because this is where I see this huge shift in what men were allowed to appreciate. They could appreciate a woman in a beautiful dress, but to appreciate just the dress was somehow effeminate and inappropriate, and that must mean that they are insert all the things here. So it was a really fascinating thing to read. It was handled very discreetly, and in the end, There's no evidence that there was anything. But I was a little uncomfortable about how ambiguous Sidney's stance on it was. And so I'm nervous. I went to my friend who said, these books are way better than the show, and the show took liberties that aren't in the books. And I asked him, I'm like, what about this? And he's like, yeah, no, it's not the same as what you saw in that show. There's depth to it. And I think Shalise said she read the third one or the fourth book first and went back and started over. And she gave the first one 5 stars. So she's like, I don't know how I can give any more to all these, So she obviously liked them. So I don't think it goes in that direction. If, like me, that makes you uncomfortable. So there was that. But I was so glad that I read this, because it really got me thinking about how we, as a society, particularly men in that era, how we demonized something that there was nothing wrong with, and where that led, and what could maybe have happened. I don't know. But anyway, it was really good. It was very well written and very just approachable. So it felt so very Father Brownish. I think if C.S. Lewis and Father Brown had been meshed into a English vicar, you might have Sidney. Yeah, I really do. Okay, now that we've just spent the last 6 hours talking about one book, let's move along and do something a little more lighthearted. So next up, I read Henrietta's War, News from the Home Front. And it goes to 1942, I think. Yeah, 1942. And this one, it was so delightful. It's completely epistolary, one-sided. We get all of her letters to her childhood friend Robert, and she's just telling him all the home news. And you learn a little bit more about Robert in the next book, but in this first one, we don't know, other than the fact that he is her childhood friend. That's all we know. We know that he knows about her and her husband and the village because of the way she talks about him. She doesn't introduce people to him, so he has to know who these people are, but we don't really quite know if that's true until we start thinking about it, right? But she just writes everything that happens, and she's such a delightful character. She's, her husband is the doctor, and one of the things that she talks about, I think more in the next book, but she talks about how she's always referred to as the doctor's wife. And she's like, can't I just be myself? Do I always have to have your name attached to it? And I think partly because she's not a competent woman. She's a little ditzy, not because she's not intelligent, but because she kind of acts before she thinks sometimes. And, she's kind of got a lifetime in this village, so people make assumptions, and she just kind of goes along with them, even when they're not. It's so much fun, just the stories, and you get an overarching feel of life in that village, and what the blackout looked like. I mean, at one point she has to go to court because there was a light showing, and it turns out that it was something from her mirror. I think it was the candle was reflecting in the mirror and then getting through somehow. I don't know. It was just great. But just you see those kinds of things that happened during the war, but you didn't really see them play out necessarily, because they don't always make it into books, because that's not what the book is about. So it might get squeaked in here or there, but not always. And this just shows a lot of those little things that you just had no idea were going to make it into it. And that was super cool. But she also does some of the most ridiculous, most ludicrous, let's see, was it in this one? Or in one of them, her dog runs into a puppy, and they're frisking and frolicking and having a good time, and then They head out into this area that is marked off as having landmines. You don't go in there. And she has to go rescue the dog. So she sees this old man and she's telling him, you know, if I don't make it back, basically, but he doesn't hear that part, you know, just tell my husband I love him. And, you know, and the guy thinks she's trying to kill herself, and he's trying to tell her, no, you don't have to do this. And she's just trying to shut him up so that she can get out there and save her dog. And she finally gets it through to him, and he's like, oh, we took those out ages ago. And it's just like this crazy, just overblown thing. And yet, yes, this is how things work. And there are a couple of characters. There's this one woman, she's so flighty and she's so superficial and she's so, frankly, ridiculous. And then she gets married and she has a baby. And she just becomes the neatest person. And her husband kind of turns into the slightly ridiculous because he's so determined to be a good husband to her. And it's just, I had a blast with it. I think everyone should read it. And I'm so sad that there are only the two. I wish this went through, because what we don't get a lot of, you know, the next one ends in 1945. And I'm just going to combine these two because it's about the same. I'll talk about something in a minute. But we get a lot of books that end with the war, maybe a little bit after. Sometimes it'll take us to, you know, the idea that there's going to be the Nuremberg trials and stuff, but it's all focused on war-ish stuff. What we don't get a lot of is 1946 to 1950-ish, maybe a little bit past, where they're still dealing with the rationing. It gets mentioned, but we don't see it. We don't see the frustration of, I need a new pair of shoes, but because we have to shoe the Germans who attacked us, I can't get them. We don't get to see all that over there. Not just as part of a story. It just mentioned in passing and moved along. We don't actually get to see it in action. And I'd really like to see someone write that book. Or, if you know that book, I want that book. I mean, we saw a little bit of it in the Guernsey book. But that it was so very different, too. Because, you know, that island was cut off for so long that the slightest little thing was a blessing. And so we don't really see it. Not like I'm looking for. I want day-to-day life stuff. You know, I want to see the whole thing play out, not just be told that, yeah, this kid passed out and life is good. You know, I want to see those moments in the lives of a bunch of villagers and all kind of mushed together. So if you know that book or that series, that would be even better. Yeah, tell me. So, okay, Henrietta's War, the second one is, it takes you through 1945 and the end of the war and everybody rejoicing and life is grand. But I listened to these on Audible, and the first narrator, I loved it. I mean, it's one of those things where I don't know that I even like her as a narrator for another book, but it was great for this one. The narrator for the second book is not the same narrator, and she drove me insane. She didn't have the same ability to emphasize the right words at the right places. The way she signed off, you know, affectionately your childhood friend Henrietta, is how she like signed off everything. But this gal, it was really flippant sounding. Affectionately your childhood friend Henrietta. And it just, every time, I just wanted to slug her. It was just so bad. It drove me insane. And yeah, so I actually don't recommend the second audio. Maybe it wouldn't bother somebody else, but yeah, not a fan. Okay, the next one I read and finished, and it was for Epistolary January, was The Matchmaker's Gift. And this one, so it's split time with just a sprinkling of magical realism in it. There is this thing where this matchmaker, even as a little girl, when she sees two people who should be together in close proximity, she sees this light that crosses between them. And then, you know, this is how she knows that these are going to be, you know, perfect people for each other. And this book did something really neat with this. So you've got this girl, She knows when two people are good for each other. But the book shows that just because that's true doesn't mean that getting them there doesn't cause pain for somebody somehow. Whether it's someone else who was interested, or whether it's like for her and her family, this girl's matchmaker, her name's Sarah, and her matchmaking, the problem with it is that this is something that they're Russian immigrants, and over there, this is something that men did, and this is their livelihood, and this girl is taking away their matches, so they're not getting paid, and they're not happy about it. And I mean, it goes all the way to the point where she actually ends up before a Jewish court, you know, being accused of doing something wrong, and you know, all the things that have to go with it. It's a really neat story. It's one of those things where this is the kind of thing that authors often take something and turn it really feministic, you know, like anything a guy can do, I can do better, kind of feministic stuff. That doesn't happen here. You know, for her, it's a matter of, I have a gift and I'm going to use my gift, and I shouldn't have to fear for my family because these guys are basically taking the lazy route, trying to get the best money for their matches rather than looking at what people really are looking for and what they really need. So she's, you know, she's definitely kind of flipping on both sides, but the point is she wants to help her family, period. And she shouldn't be, you know, downgraded because it doesn't fit their narrative. You know, we're in a new country, things are different here, why not, right? So I don't have a problem with that. Now, at the end of the book, I did have a problem because there is this little moment where Sarah, we find out that Sarah actually facilitated a gay match with and I could tell that this was probably going to come in. I really thought it was going to come in with the granddaughter, the split time other side. But it didn't. And we don't see it really taking place as much as we know about it. But there were a few times that a few things were said with basically the theme of love is love. And I'm having a really hard time more with, these are people, why am I snoring dogs? These are people, Jewish people who are very full of their faith. They know the Torah, they know the scriptures, and yet she says and does this. And I'm like, how does this fit? This feels like, because it doesn't fit, especially someone that old, from that far back, who hasn't been brought up with this change in mindset, I'm having a hard time imagining this as realistic. This just isn't fitting. But I think what's making it fit, in the author's mind anyway, is that, or how she tried to make it fit, is that, you know, Sarah sees this light, so this must be okay. It didn't work for me. Aside from my own personal opinions, and that doesn't matter, set that aside, it doesn't fit the faith, the situations. The Torah is the Torah, the Bible is the Bible. I mean, they have the Old Testament, they've got the scriptures. It doesn't change. And it didn't work for me. It really bothered me. It's why I dropped a star. I liked it. Other than that, there were very few words. But where there were words, it was weird because, again, you have irreverent uses of God's name. There were a couple of them. It wasn't like it's on, you know, even in every chapter. There were just a handful sprinkled, but I'm like, why? And then there were a couple of, you know, crude excrementy kind of things. But for the most part, it wasn't in there until the very end had a bit more. it was like almost nothing, and then it was sprinkled a little heavier. It's still sprinkled just lightly, but heavier than at the beginning, where it's like once every 10 chapters or something. I mean, just not that much. But I didn't appreciate it. That brought down the rating, but also just I didn't feel real that this would happen with her faith. That didn't click with me. But as a general rule, I liked the story. And I liked the idea. I liked the fact that happily ever after still included pain for some in some way. Sometimes if one person ended up with someone else, then, so there was that. Really, mostly pretty good. Yeah, it's over there. I could have been cheering. Hold on. So yeah, that was this one. Again, I really liked it for the most part. I'm not keeping it. It's not one that I will reread, so there's no reason to keep it. And I didn't appreciate some of those words, but it was clean. Otherwise, we don't get smut or anything. And the language was very minimal. So, for what it's worth. Okay, and finally, the last book that I finished so far, like I said, there were only 5, is The Burning of Rosemont Abbey. Do you guys remember when this was on my, I went to pre-order list last year? Yeah, this is the one that almost immediately after that video where I'm supposed to be waiting, I turned around and bought the thing. Yeah, this one. Okay, so this is 1950s England. Paul and Louisa Everly are twins, and their parents were killed when they were young. I'm going to say 10, 12, somewhere in there. I'm not sure how old, but reasonably young. And they went to live with an aunt and uncle who live in, a manor house. They are somebody. And the vicarage at Rosemont Abbey, where they used to live, now has a new vicar, who is, can I just say up front, before we even get into the story, this vicar was the sweetest guy. If you took Sidney Chambers from the Grantchesters and Father Brown and smashed them together, you would get this very, very, very sweet guy. Loved him so much. He was worth reading the book for. I mean, even if you don't like mysteries and you don't like, any of the other stuff that's in this thing, he was worth reading it for because he was just such a neat guy. Now, I just talked to her on the podcast. She's got another mystery in the works, but her next book coming out, I believe, is another biblical retelling, which is the first book I've read by her. I didn't realize I'd read anything by her until she was talking about it, and I went and looked and was like, oh yeah, I've read that book. So she's got a biblical retelling coming out in a few weeks, but for now, there's this one, and then she's got another one she's about to do. So in this one, we've got Paul and Louisa. Paul is a mess. He has been a mess for a long time. He's kind of known around town for being, we'll call him a ne'er-do-well. He's always in trouble. He really has a little respect for people with money, and for good reason. I will give him that. But then one night, and Louisa, on the other hand, has fitted into this family very well. Her aunt didn't have any children, so she kind of took Louisa in as her daughter and really kind of pretty much as a doll, dressed her up, got her the right education. She's going to get her the best marriage. It's going to be awesome, right? She's totally a society girl. And then one night while they're all at this main party at this house where Louisa is going out with the son of the family, they're all hoping for this marriage between them. The Abbey, where her parents, her father had been the vicar, the Abbey burns. And everybody, the vicar who is there now, because remember their parents are dead, the vicar who is there now is injured. And all clues point to Paul. But Louisa never having had this kind of thing before and never really buying into it, she knows the exact moment Paul died. She knows. She felt it. She didn't believe it, but she knows. And she's bothered because now he is being treated as the, villain in the whole village, where he didn't do it, and B, someone has killed him, and they're not going to answer for it, and she's not happy. So this is all about her trying to prove her brother innocent, find out who really did it. Okay, here's the deal. I called it. I didn't have any proof. I didn't even have any reason, except it just made sense. It made sense on paper, but I didn't have a reason. I was like, this is who did it. This is it. I just don't know why. It doesn't make sense. There's nothing to back this up, but I just knew. And I was right. And the reason behind it, once it came out, I was like, yep, I'm right. Yep, I have no doubt. And I was, but as a Playfair mystery, you can get it right or you can get it wrong. The information is there to find it. And, there's that. If you're accustomed to reading British fiction, there are a few anachronisms. At one point, what did they describe? They described something, maybe somebody's eyes, as the color of money. British money isn't green. I mean, I don't know if they have a green bill, but they have other colors. It's very colorful money. Each denomination is a different color, and they're the biggest ones. For the biggest denominations, they get smaller depending on the denomination. And so, I mean, it's very, that's very American and very not right. Also, they went looking for someone who might have gone to get bandages after being shot. And she sent them to a pharmacy. That's not what they'd say there. And so there were those two that stand out. It feels like there was another one, but I can't remember what it was. So it may all be in my head. But there were a couple, they're minor. Most people wouldn't catch it. But if you spend a lot of time watching British TV or reading British books, you're going to. It didn't affect me at all. I was like, I don't care. I listened to it. I own it and I'm going to keep it. But I listened to it on audio. Great narrator, worked perfectly. And because I listened, now I will probably, when I reread it, I'll probably catch all kinds of other fun things that I missed. But it was a good story. When I was talking to her on the podcast, I said that I thought she should write, and when she writes this other one, I asked if there's any crossover, and she's like, no. And I'm like, well, then you need a third one where somehow the people from that one and the people from this one all converge, and so I hope I've convinced her. I would like more. I love the setting. I love the time period. I loved how the mystery played out, and there's a romance in it, and this time the romance really enhanced the book. It didn't just kind of, go along with it, and that's nice. No, it really actually enhanced the story and made it better. And I thought that was neat because that doesn't always happen. Sometimes you just kind of get a little tired of the whole romance thing, but not this time, not for me. I thought it was really well done. It fit everything very well. And I really can't say anything. I mean, it's kind of obvious on the one hand, but on the other hand, if I say anything specific, it could affect enjoyment. So I'm not going to go I'm just going to say I actually enjoyed the romance for its sake. And that's pretty rare. So it wasn't over the top. That was nice. But it was mostly toward the end. That was also nice. But it was just... I could read more romances that were like that. I could get into that because it was just so real. But the reason it was so real was that it was just part of life. It wasn't life itself. So maybe that's it. But anyway, so as for what I'm reading right now, I'm done with chapter 1 of Mere Christian Hermeneutics. I've changed how I do this. So I started off and I was just making my notes as I read. And then, so with chapter 1, I stopped and I just read chapter 1 out of here. And then I let that percolate for a couple of days. And, because, I mean, if you can see, I'm having the daylights out of this thing. But it percolated for a couple of days. And then I started over in chapter 1 and started taking my notes then. And I was doing a much better job of getting the best of what I needed to write down. So I wasn't writing as much. Or maybe there's just not as much to write. I'm not sure. But also, I'm really taking it in better. So again, I have said that if I only get through chapter 1 in January, I'm going to consider that I did well. But I suspect I'll get through 2 or 3, which is kind of nice. And I'll just keep going, you know, maybe just a chapter a month all year. We'll see. I started The Light Between Worlds. And guys, okay, so Chantal's been talking about this book, and she's talked about how it's such a good representation of what depression really looks like. And she talked about how you really empathize with the girl. It's not weighty and dragging you down, but you're really still seeing it. All those things that she said, they're totally true. But what she didn't say, and I don't think it's a spoiler because I'm only 10 chapters in, something like that. What she didn't say, and I'm still kind of fascinated by, is that I don't know if this other world, the Woodlands, I think it's called, I don't know if this other world is physical or a place she escapes to in her depressive moments. And if her siblings used to play along with her and now, you know, you're old enough that we need to stop doing this, or if it really was real. I don't know. She's making me question it. And I think that's really neat. Also, it's very mild. As a matter of fact, I'm even going to say what it is because it's not a spoiler. But this book explains by showing why people self-harm. And it's, like I said, it's not, this isn't a spoiler, and it's not graphic, but it still shows it so well. So she wants to feel something. She just needs to feel. And so she's weeding and she runs across these nettles and she just thrusts her hands into them. And the pain is there, but now she can feel. And it was like the most, because when I first understood why people do things like cutting and stuff, it was so they can feel. That suddenly made sense. Actually, it was Stephen James with the Patrick Bauer books where I learned that. And I remember asking him about that when we were at my writing retreat and he came to talk to us. I remember asking, I was like, where did you find this? Because this is genius. But that's what you're seeing in this one. I'm picking at the sticker. This is fine. But it was a genius way of showing it really gently so that it's not traumatizing to the reader who doesn't understand. Because it's not, it's one thing to cause yourself pain by, something stinging you. It's another thing to see someone actually cutting themselves open, and I mean, I know it's not, deep slicing, whatever, but, my daughter, when she went to a youth group and this guy described his pain when he was a teen, and he was trying to be really helpful and encouraging, and all he did was traumatize her. She walked away from that, she left in the middle of it because she couldn't take it. He was just too descriptive and it was too much. And that's what this author did so well, so far anyway. is that she showed the pain and showed how people deal with the pain in an inappropriate way per se, but in understandable way. But she showed it without traumatizing the reader in the process. We see only the character's trauma, and so therefore we hurt for her instead of have everything so focused on our visceral reactions. Because sometimes if you make the reader hurt so much that they distance themselves from the book because they're now dealing with their own pain, then you've lost them out of the story. And that's what she did so well. So I'm really hoping that the whole book continues this way, because I like it so far. I thought it was really good. I'm in the middle of Thoroughfare and I'm reading this with Ashley, and this is so funny. I love the fact that most of it is from the little boy Jeffrey's point of view. Him getting a haircut was a hoot. I'm only on like 25, 30, something like that. But, so I'm there. But they're still on the ocean. They're still having fun. And Bee's feeling better. That's good. She's been in her berth since they got on the boat. But, yeah, I'm just having a blast with the story. It's, I don't know how to describe it, but it's just one of those books from that time where you just settle in and you just get this story, and it's fun and fun. If you'll notice, I'm not tabbing anything because it's not that kind of book, and I love it. But whatever. And then I'll get to page 90 tonight on Yours, Jack. These are the letters of C.S. Lewis. I haven't trimmed yet today, but these have such a deep margin that I'm just, instead of layering it on, I'm just stopping here and then I'm trimming them off to probably the same length, because why not? But really enjoying these letters, enjoying getting to see, because they start, before he's a Christian, and we're moving into, he's definitely a Christian now, but it's only the 40s, and he's kind of a thunder puppy as far as he can go. He doesn't have a lot of patience with things that don't sit the way he thinks they should. But you can tell that he's learning and growing, and watching him with prayer. He's the one that said, I remember it from Shadowlands, when Joy, they get the news that the cancer's gone, and Joy so he's hurrying back to the hospital, and his friend says, I know you've been praying for this so long and God has answered your prayers. And he says, I don't pray to change God's mind. I pray to change myself. I pray because I can't help it. It's in me every moment, thinking and breathing. And I mean, just, you see him here just struggling with the idea that prayer is like mailing a letter, and you don't even know if it's going to reach its destination, because you don't know where the destination is. And so it just goes out into the void, to that man later. And it's really neat. I'm really enjoying it. And it's also making me really sad that I don't have those letters from Lucy Ma Montgomery that I paid for. Hi, how you doing? And then, I haven't been talking about it, but I've been reading Sheltering Mercy. We're doing Psalms in our Bible study. And Sheltering Mercy is Ryan Whitaker Smith and Dan Wilt, I think it is. I think it's Wilt. Yeah, and Dan Wilt have taken the Psalms, and then they have taken the whole counsel of Scripture. So, the Psalms were written from David's perspective before the cross. So these guys have taken those Psalms and infused, fulfilled prophecy into the right places and stuff. And so they're really rich, and they've turned them into prayers. And this 9 is, I'm going to read it. I'm just going to read the whole thing, because it's my not so humble opinion that this book is worth it for Psalm 9, the prayer that they've written for it. We'll end with this. It's a good place to end. It's called Psalm 9, Native Tongue. And it says, Lord, may gratitude be my native tongue, and may I speak it well. For all you have done and all you have forgiven, word and object, phrase and verse, may I be fluent in the grammar of grace. Enemies seen and unseen scorn your paths. Stumbling, they break their necks for lack of sense. Their memory a mist, lives lost in time. You rule and reign over all, King of earth and heaven, avenging wrath and wrong, forgiving and forgetting. You are a house for the homeless, the strengthener of the weak, the joy and song of those who know your name, the trust of every stalwart heart. I will sing your praise, proclaiming the story of your mercy as long as I live, that I'm loved from eternity, bought with blood, raised to new life. When I am assaulted, Lord, accused and attacked, hemmed in by hatred, draw me from the mire, lift me to higher ground. The nations are a breath, reigning in glory until time makes fools of them all. Their cities, once lights of the world, now buried in rock and clay, while your kingdom, Lord, has no end. You are the hope of the desperate, the comfort of the afflicted, the joy of the redeemed. I praise you for the working of your will, the kindness of your grace. No one can stand against you, awesome in power, righteous in anger, the one true King. My favorite line, may I be fluent in the grammar of grace. Isn't that just beautiful? Yeah. I love it when people know how to use words, man. That is just, Anyway, that's what I got for you. It took much longer than I expected. I kind of rambled. Hopefully I'll cut some of that out. But if I don't, sorry. And I will see you again on Monday with things. Because things. See you Monday.